Hello, I'm Toby Frost. I'm a member of Local 472 in Lafayette, Indiana. I'm a captain in our fire department, and I'm also a subject matter expert for federal resources when it comes to the opioid epidemic.
Hi, Al Van Heck, Bloomfield Township, Michigan, Local 3045, captain there, and also a subject matter expert for federal resources regarding the opioid epidemic.
So now we want to talk about managing our exposure risks a little bit. One of the challenges with this is protecting ourselves and trying to figure out what the proper level of PPE is and how do we go about that. Identifying an opioid early on can be challenging because it comes in so many different forms, from our classic China White or our tar heroin to cement death or black death or gravel, all those different acronyms you hear out there. It comes in a lot of different forms. And what's different is that we're no longer seeing pure heroin. It's being adulterated with the synthetic opioids. And so the reality is there is no such thing as a pure heroin, a pure organic opioid any longer. They're all cut with some sort of synthetic. Our crime lab reports that all drug samples they get, 96% of them are cut with a synthetic of some sort. So there is just no pure product anymore. So we have this constantly changing market, which means identifying it can be a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, we're kind of seeing the same thing here in Michigan, and it's pretty interesting going throughout the country and teaching this class. It's definitely different regionally. What you see on the East Coast is different than the West Coast, but I think the one commonality between all of it is the fact that there's at least one sort of synthetic in it. And a lot of times this stuff's getting cut so much that you don't really know what's in it.
So, and along with that, there's a ton of misinformation. People have seen all the different headlines out there. One touch is going to kill you. If you look at this stuff from across the room, it's going to kill you. It's just kind of gotten crazy and gotten out of hand. And so what we really want to do is go back and look at this from kind of a hazmat perspective. What are the physical characteristics of this product? How's it going to hurt us? And that will drive how we protect ourselves. So let's get rid of some of that misinformation, and some of that stuff we've seen in the media, and look at the chemical physical properties of this product and see how to protect ourselves. So one of the big myths out there is, can you overdose by touching it? And one of the nice things about fentanyl is we know a lot about it. There's been an enormous amount of research already done about it. And so when we look at it, we know that a lethal dose of fentanyl in your blood is 2.55 milligrams. And bear with me, I'm going to throw a lot of numbers out here, but what I'm trying to show you is the science behind skin absorption. Is it really a risk? We know that the average human body has about 18,000 centimeters of skin, plus or minus. And we know that fentanyl goes through your skin at 61 nanograms per centimeter squared per hour. A lot of numbers, but here's the bottom line. We know exactly how fast it passes through your skin because of all this research that's gone on since the 50s and 60s. We know how it gets into our skin. So based on that, if you were to totally cover your body in pure fentanyl, not street cut, not a street cut product, but pure fentanyl, you have to lay there for 2.3 hours to get a lethal dose. 2.3 hours, 2 hours and 20 minutes. Is that even realistic? What we're talking about here is completely cover yourself. So instead of sand, pure fentanyl, from head to toe and pure fentanyl. Protect your respiratory, because we know if you inhale it, it's going to get in your bloodstream very quickly and it will cause a problem. So protect your respiratory, cover your skin from top to bottom. You're going to have to sit there for over 2 hours to get a lethal dose. That's just not even realistic. So from a realistic perspective, what does that mean? Let's say you cover the palm of your hand. For some reason, you handle some product and the palm of your hand is covered in pure fentanyl. After 15 minutes, you're done with the run, you wash your hands off. How much is going to get in your blood? Your exposure after 15 minutes is going to be about 76 nanograms. Again, I'm throwing around a lot of numbers and units here, but the units are critical. What are we talking about? A lethal dose is 2.5 billion nanograms. An anesthetic dose, 25,000 nanograms. So 340 times your exposure after 15 minutes. And your analgesic dose, to take away a little bit of your pain, is 2,500 nanograms. So 35 times what your actual exposure is just to take care of your backache. So realistically, if you get it on your skin, you're not going to overdose. You're realistically not even going to feel it. Wash it off with soap and water, and you should be good to go. Protect your respiratory. If you would get it in your breathing zone, you get it in your mouth, your nose, it's going to absorb in your body significantly faster and can pose a problem. Your eyes absorb 80 times faster than your skin. So if you rub your eyes, you run the risk of it getting in your body much faster. But the reality is that touching it is simply not an operational concern.
Hey, Toby, one of the things that I think is really important, what you said, is the end user versus pure. And most of what we're seeing on our overdose scenes is end user opioids. They have to keep in mind that this stuff is cut, and there's only a small amount of opioids in that powder, and a lot of that powder is just inert substances. You have to treat a pure powder differently than you would a stepped on or an end user amount. That pure powder has more damaging potential than that end user stuff.
Yeah, that's an absolutely critical point. We took a worst case scenario in these calculations saying it was pure fentanyl. But just like Al said, the reality is that your street products are a 1% to 3% concentration. Just like when you buy a pharmaceutical pill, we all realize that most of the pill is binding agent, a filler agent, and there's just a little bit of medicine in there. The same thing's true with these illicit substances, that the pure product is so potent that they're cutting it down to 1% to 3% concentration. So we have a massive safety factor on top of that when we talk about the difference between a street cut product and a pure product. The easiest way to look at this is let's break our scenarios up into 4 different response scenarios, kind of based on a risk-based response. And so we're going to talk about 4 different scenarios. We're going to go from none to small. And then if we were to exceed that, it would be a large or a lab. When we get into large or lab, we're really talking about illicit lab teams, Klan lab teams, your narcotics investigation teams, things of that nature. But for most of us first responders, where we're going to see something will be in the none to small range. And we'll talk more about these in a couple seconds here. But basically, when we talk about none, there's no free product or uncontained material. There's no dust. If I have dust, my risk goes up. So then when we move to the small, we're talking about a little bit of free material, a little bit of powder, a little bit of dust, where we have a minimal risk of exposure. And so as we go up, our risk increases, and so does our response considerations. So when I have my standard everyday overdose, I don't really need a Klan lab team. I don't need all kinds of detection, and I don't need to bring out a GCMS to try to identify the product. There just aren't those needs. But when you move up the scale, all those considerations and all those needs go up with the risk. And so that's what we need to be aware of. So as we start to identify this as a first responder, what we're looking at is most people will encounter the none or the small. And so we're at the lower end of the risk scale. And so that's how we're going to base our reaction based on those properties of that product and the risk, our risk-based response. How much are we realistically going to be exposed to, and what do we need to protect ourselves from?
One of the things I want to hit on too on that is when we talk labs, we need to keep in mind that a lab for opioids is a little different than a lab, what we would expect with a meth lab or other things. It's really probably just a milling lab where they're pressing those powders into some pills or they're mixing them up. And you really have to think that end user usually has a small amount of product on them. When you start seeing large amounts of product, you really need to start thinking about escalating this into more of a hazmat type response than just a basic medical.
Yeah, as a first responder, if you exceed the small level, if anything goes, and we'll talk about these here in a second, but once you get beyond the small level, you shouldn't be in there. It's time to back out, leave that for the specially trained teams with the more resources. You've exceeded your level of protection and your level of training. So it's time to go back out the door. If you've got a victim, grab them, drag them outside. There's no reason to be in that space. It's a crime scene. It's a hazmat scene. It's time to back out. You don't want to be there anymore. So when we talk about the response guidelines and we talk about a none, what are we talking about? And so here's a visual. All of these would be considered a none. So you've got the victim that's overdosed. There's a hypodermic needle sitting next to them, maybe still stuck in their arm. Realistically, the fentanyl is not going to jump out of that needle and get you. I'm way more concerned about a needle stick, about basic bloodborne pathogens, than I am whatever's inside that needle. If they've got pills, if they're intact, or if they're in a plastic bag, they're not going to jump out and get you. There's no powder. There's nothing to aerosolize. And so I'm really not concerned about it. So it's still a none. The baggie of powder, as long as it's sealed up, that's a none. There's no free material. And so for the none, what we're really talking about is, do you see any free material? If there's no free material, if there's no risk of powder or dust, that's a none scenario. And so when we start looking at our PPE, we're really talking about our standard medical run, the runs we do every day. You may or may not want police there, fire, EMS, your standard response, nothing exotic here. You still want to have a buddy there, regardless of what you really think is there, to reduce your risk. Keep your eyes open, and you're going to wear nitrile gloves. That's what we're after. Protect your skin. Again, we already talked about it's not going to absorb through your skin, but you don't want to transfer any powder onto your person after the run. And there's a lot of other stuff out there besides just opioids. We don't want to risk bringing any contamination. So back to EMT 101, right? BSI scene safe. We're going to make sure that we isolate our body and that we keep any product off of our hands. There's another myth out there that has gone around that fentanyl will absorb through latex gloves. There's no real science behind that. The reality is, if you're wearing latex gloves or you're wearing nitrile gloves, both will work equally well. Nitrile gloves has become the industry standard. That's what most people have on their truck. And so that's where we're considering this is our basic level of PPE at the none response level. Now we move up. Now we move to the small. Now you've encountered some free material. And our measure for this is a gram of product. Now, most people don't know what a gram of product looks like. It's a packet of sugar. If you go to the coffee bar, grab a packet of sugar or a packet of Sweet and Low, rip it open, dump it out, that's what a gram looks like. And so that's what we're talking about. That's our threshold, a gram or less. It's a pile about the size of a penny or a couple crushed up pills. Some people abuse this substance by crushing the pill and snorting it. So that's what we're talking about. A gram or less is considered a small. If you walk into a scene and you see more than a gram of product, or you see large bags of product, or you see lots of bags ready for packaging, or you see scales, or you see powder anywhere, we've exceeded the small, we've moved to the large, and it's time to back out. There's no reason to be in there. You've exceeded your level of PPE. Back out, call for law enforcement, call for the Clan Lab teams. You shouldn't be in there any longer.
Hey, Toby, if I can add really quick that just a quick heads up for everybody. If you see pills on scene and the pills are just crumbling apart, they're just falling apart, they are probably homemade pills. A lot of times they have a hard time getting these pills to stay together. So if you see pills in a baggie or you see pills that are just literally crumbling apart, they're probably fake or handmade pills.
And so when we're in this situation, what kind of PPE are we talking about? Well, if you can see it, you want to protect your respiratory. That's what it comes down to. That's the most basic way of looking at this. If I can see it, I want to wear a respirator. N95 will work. A P100 is even better if you have that. Consider eye protection. Goggles, ideally. We don't want any powder in our eyes. We said that your eyes will absorb it 80 times faster than your skin. So we want to protect that route of entry. So non-vented goggles, gasketed safety glasses, something like that, protect your eyes to keep the powder out of your eyes. You're going to wear your gloves now, just like you would any other med call. We want to keep it off our skin so we don't transfer it around between our patient, ourselves, or our apparatus. And then if you're going into a home or something like that, consider boot coverings, especially if you see powder all over. We had a case here in a nearby jurisdiction where it was a check well-being. They opened the door. There was an unconscious male on the floor. As they started to walk across the floor, they noticed they were leaving footprints in the carpet because of all the dust in the air. So had they had boot coverings on, we wouldn't have had to worry about taking the possibility of taking that contamination out of the room. So another consideration here is just slipping some boot covers on real quick. the things that are going to be exposed the most to possible contamination are our hands and our feet. And so if we've got those boot covers on, you can just take them off and you don't have to worry about carrying that product outside. And remember, if you go into this scene and there's a lot more than a gram there, it's time to back out. If you have a viable patient that looks like they're alive, or you have indication they're alive, or you're just not sure and you're going to work that patient, you don't have to work them in the scene. Pull them out to the front porch, pull them out of the car, pull them out of the hotel room into the hallway, get away from that dust and that product, and you're just going to protect yourself. You don't have to work the patient right there. So at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, if you've run into that situation where it's more than what you thought it was, you went too far, it's time to back out. We're moving up the chain now. We're moving to large. We're moving to the lab response. And at that point, it's time to back out, call for more resources. And if that's something your team's going to do, reach out to us at Federal Resources and we can provide that training, federalresources.com, for that next level training to go beyond the none and the small, and for more information about those tactics and resources that you need.